Sheepdog has been a 14-year journey for Matt and I. It began in 2011 on our first nationwide road trip, and we were in search of uncovering the truth of an experience that I had had with a local tow truck driver just 3 hours north of Los Angeles. My car broke down, and our conversation during that 3-hour drive transpired from him discussing the challenges in his life and his marriage, being a parent, financial hardship, and then he described to me all the different medication he was on and the fact that he was suffering from post-traumatic stress. Sheepdog is the first film that is a true exploration of the physical and psychological repercussions of trauma with a focus on post-traumatic growth. It's an exploration of what our men and women go through, their plight as veterans when they return home from conflict areas, but it's also how a community handles that, how the families handle that, whether it's the mental health workers, whether it's other veterans, the community, the families, the spouses. So it's an exploration into that.
In 2011, Stephen and I were working on another film together, and we were sharing a trailer, and he came to me with this idea for a screenplay that he had been thinking about and journaling about, and asked me if I wanted to play his best friend in the film. And I said, yeah, of course, that sounds amazing. And he said, but the caveat is you have to go on the road with me for 3 months, and we have to research and develop this project. We got, a Toyota Prius to sponsor us, and they gave us a car to drive around the country for 3 months. But when we first went into this, we didn't know who was going to talk to us, or if we would even be able to get, any veterans or any of their families to open up to us. And we did. We were fortunate enough to get sat in front of a veteran who shared his story with us, some of his darkest moments and things that he hadn't shared with, his spouse or his friends. And for us, that was really just an eye or a glimpse into what this next 14 years was going to be. They're talking to their families, talking to PTSD clinicians, mental health workers. He actually had an office at the VA in Detroit, so he had the opportunity to sit in on actual sessions and to sit with doctors, all the men and women that were suffering in silence in this epidemic that needed to be brought to the surface.
I think one of the greatest compliments that we continue to get on the festival circuit is that it feels like a documentary in the performances, and yet I shot it very classically. I feel like it's a callback to the films that I love, that I grew up with in the 90s, or even the classics from the 60s and the 70s, with the camera movements and so on, but it's very much anchored in real performances and the backdrop that's lived in, of this slice of life sort of drama. I'd like to say it's a realistic ending that's a hopeful ending. Okay, yeah. And that was really important to me and to us in telling the story, that we wanted to go as close to the bone as we could to show you the realities, but at the same time, just again inspired by countless stories that were shared with us, and just witnessing it firsthand, growth that we had seen in the men and women that we sat in front of over the years. Because it wasn't just a road trip, 13, 14 years ago. There was multiple, but we also kept in contact with many, if not all, those veterans, and we witnessed it, for better or for worse, in all of their different journeys. And so I think that if we're talking about story, it was important to us. It's, I think, a very classically structured script with the 3 acts. There's a lot of twists and turns in it that are very much represented in folks that do endure this level of trauma, and the challenges that come with that, but the triumphs of that.
I gained just under 50 pounds for the role in this film. And it was an interesting experience because it changed everything from the way I moved, from the way I like my breathing. And it's like on day one, a big chunk of like all of my the stuff that we had to shoot was pushed to the first day, and it was supposed to be like a weekend. So there was a sort of like scramble to make it happen, and we were shooting in this very tight quarters apartment. It was my character's apartment, and so you have 100 people on set, like crew members trying to like figure out this tiny space, but also just trying to get to get into the flow. And on top of it, just like my I don't know, just like the bumping around and trying to like live within the space, and it felt like a very I don't know. At the end of the day, I was like, oh my gosh, that felt like such a clumsy day. But now, as we've seen the film edited together, I think the scene turned out so beautifully. It captured I think the dynamic between the two, like the best friends, and I think it's a relationship that Steven and I know very well because we've been on this journey for so long. So ultimately, it came down to just trusting our relationship, trusting the story, trusting the words on the page, and just trusting that all those stories that have been shared with us over the years just lived within us. I ate a lot of pot pies, a lot of ice cream, pot pies and ice cream.
You just be like, you just hear the microwave going all the time.
That's it. I used to go to the grocery store and just look at frozen meals and look like what had the most like calories.
But I want to say too that as much as and I'm glad that we're able to joke about it because Matt is healthy and he's been able to get himself back to a healthy place. But it was important why Matt did that was because oftentimes we had seen that some men and women we had sat in front of that were suffering in silence would eat their pain, and they weren't necessarily a drug addict or an alcoholic or. And then there's just the men and women that come home and are like, I want to eat well, and that's a different side of it too. But no, it was definitely in his character, and I think that too for Matt, because he's so hard to look at, was used to being sort of defined by perhaps the outer package rather than the inner, and I think that physical transformation put him into a place where it forced him to feel vulnerable and move differently through a room, and it comes through in terms of self-esteem, and and it's nuanced, and that's the beauty of when you can do that, because Matt will tell you on a movie you never get that kind of time. No. Usually the moment you book something as an actor, if you book it the audition, it's usually 2 weeks away, right? On a movie maybe 3 to 4, but unless you're Tom Hardy and you're or Christian Bale or Reese Witherspoon or something like that, or Viola Davis, you have no time. And so to be able to live with the material as long as we were able to, but also to live with the characters more importantly. And I think that by the time we got to set, I did have a moment on day 2 or 3 when we were walking over the small passenger bridge by the paper mill, and I had shivers of just how comfortable and yet uncomfortable I felt in the character's skin, that it was all just very real but also very surreal.
You also went through a body transformation for it too.
Yeah, I wasn't going to get into that.
Right, but you also were
dark and morose.
Well, it is, but it was also not.
I was a nervous. I was a basket case. It was a lot of stress, and I couldn't hold down food, and I was dramatically losing weight, and I couldn't. I thought I was actually really sick. I went to a doctor and they took blood levels, and they're like, no. And I think it was just complete stress of so I was losing weight, and it was my character that was actually it was always written that way, that my character was going to gain the weight. And I actually called Matt, and this is 4 months before going to camera. And I said, I'm worried that we're even not going to get there because this is just so much. But I definitely know that I'm never going to be able to gain the weight that we said that we were going to do. And trust me, my genes, if I eat Subway for a week, you can roll me down the street. And so Matt was like, well, funny you should say that, because I thought I was going to lose weight for the role. And having just entered my 40s, the weight was coming on instead of shedding off. So it actually worked out quite well. Yeah. But I would say that, in that though, there's something kind of freeing, in a body transformation, because it's allows you to let go of the sort of, I don't know, maybe lack of a better word, ego of yourself as an actor, or yourself in the real world. So differently.
You feel so differently, so you're allowed to sort of slip into it in a different way.
I had my moments of you get home from set and you're exhausted, and you have to prep for the next day, and feeling frail and thin, and like you kind of look down at your body and it's not like it's not yours, and it's really strange. And I think it psychologically, I think it almost like it comes across on camera unintentionally, because it was like we were like holed up at the Red Roof Inn during filming. I was separate, like my wife, most of us, like our significant others, like we were in this world, almost like in this bubble. And I think I don't know, it was, I mean, after a week of filming, I've never shared this, but like after a week of filming, I remember we had a day off and I went to go see my dogs, and they were like, didn't recognize me, which can be heartbreaking because I love my dogs. I had, my beard, and I'm just exhausted and probably moving like I'm 85, and it was really heartbreaking. And when we see the film and just see how beautiful all the performances came together, we're just we hope is that the work that was put in transcends to the folks that it matters most to. So Matt and I used to always say that we would complete the mission or die trying. And we really did. In our first road trip, we said that to each other. And we also said that no one man or woman is above the mission. And we lived that. And I take great pride in that. And I know that the first part of it doesn't particularly sound healthy, because we were willing to die for it. Like, we cared that much. And that's why when it often comes up to us, like, what we learned was the resilience. And I think, and I've said this before, and I really mean this, that because of the men and women that trusted us for all those years that we sat in front of, they were our North Star. So there was never a quit. And I can't tell you how many people over the years, you got to figure in 14 years, how many people said, "Oh, you guys are still doing that? Did you guys ever make it?" And it's heartbreaking, because you're like, yeah, we're still going. And I think what I learned, and I know that we share this experience, is that when you care so much about something and so deeply for it, and the folks that you're representing, and the great responsibility that comes with that, that you will go to the edge of the earth. And I feel like we did that. And that's why part of why I'm so proud of it, and the response that we're getting on the film festival circuit. It's my life's greatest work, and I'm just tremendously proud. So we lived it, but like you have to know your why. Like, we've been in this industry a long time, and we put in our work, and the rejection over the years, and LA's it's sunny, but it's a tough place to live, and I did 21 years there, and it was tough, and there was a lot of times on this particular journey for this film where the carrot was dangled, and we were constantly forced into unfavorable positions that would have benefited the film, and maybe in the short run, but we would have sold our souls for. And I think that, like, for any filmmaker out there that is compelled to tell a story, you have to stay true to yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you write a 180-page script and say, "I don't care, that's the length of it," because we all know that guy, because I was that guy years ago. But if you're compelled and you have a story to tell, and it's worth telling, you got to be willing to put it out there, and that can come in the form of getting script notes from colleagues, from people you trust. But you have to be willing to fail. I cannot express to you enough how many times doors were closed in our face. We were laughed out of rooms. People went out of their way to be cruel to us. And we're talking about a veterans film, right? And I think that resilience, where we kind of got more skilled in not stepping on the landmines, right? Or not putting ourselves in a situation where, you have to question somebody's motives and so on. But I definitely think, in terms of the storytelling aspect of it, on a very basic level, if you're a writer, I would encourage you, this is just my process and it may work for you. You get a journal that has no lines on the page, so there are no rules, and you can write in it any which way. And whatever those thoughts are, they're never ridiculous, they're never meaningless. Commit it to the page. And in no time, no matter what your story is, you will fill that book. You might fill 5 of them. And before you ever get to sit in front of a laptop and sit in front of that daunting final draft blank page, you will have material. And you will have a path. And that first step is one of the biggest steps that I know just from so many people that are like, hey, I got a story for you, or oh, I'd love to write. Like taking that first step, I would encourage anyone to do that.
I started in theater when I was 12, and I've studied so many of the classics, whether it be like the Meisner or any of the. But I feel, to me, what always ended up working is like it's the best thing you can do is to study all of them and take what works from each one and apply it to yourself personally. Because I can tell you, through all of them, I was able to go and I'd say, yeah, I could, like, this Meisner technique is great, but not all of it works for me. So you just move on, you take what works and move on. And you sort of, over the years and through experience, you find what works for you. And I feel like that's sort of, I feel like art in general, but especially I would think
it's adding to your toolbox.
It's adding to your toolbox, yeah.
And I think because we had lived with the characters so long, I can tell you there was never a point during filming where we were ever off in a corner going, what would Daryl do here? Or what would Calvin do? Or working yourself up to something. Honestly, you cast right, you surround yourself with the right actors, and it can happen. And it did, and it happened every day. And that was the beauty of it.
I think too, when you have the luxury of being, especially when you have the luxury of being on a film that's shot on location, I feel like there is a part of you that exists in that character's world. So he said, like, when we were shooting Sheepdog, again, like, very physically, even on days that we weren't shooting, I still looked at that and I would see Daryl every morning. And, like, my dynamic with you, I felt like was very alive both on screen and off screen. And so you kind of, like, exist sort of in that character's world anyway, even when you're not shooting.
I love rehearsal. So my feeling is like filmmaking's too expensive to just wing it. I like to be so prepared that you can make trouble for yourself. So you can get on set, you know, and you know all the lines to everything, you know all the different ins and outs of everything. So you can take risks. Yeah. And I think that's a good place to be. This is a tremendous honor to screen Sheepdog. This is our Iowa premiere at the Julien Dubuque International Film Festival, and it's been a very warm reception. All the veterans and mental health workers, the first responders, the Gold Star family members that have come out to show their support and their families has been so overwhelming. And coming into small town America, which is very much reflected in our film, often people in small towns sometimes feel less connected to the rest of the world, and our hope was to bring folks together with this film, and I hope we accomplished that.
Along the way, we've been able to build this coalition and this sort of like grassroots campaign to go along this journey with us. So we would welcome anybody that is interested to join us on our journey. If you go to our website, sheepdogthemovie.com, you can sign up for updates. You can learn more about our past and learn more about where we are and a lot more about where we're going. And we would love to have you there. So please, sheepdogthemovie.com.